A surprising gaffe kicks off some serious security talk. This is episode 232 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm your host, Ken Ray. Do you know what Venmo is? President Biden does, and for a while at least, we knew what he was doing with it. Now, in his case, it wasn't a big deal, though it has sounded security alarms for some. We'll talk about that, plus a serious reason to grab the latest updates from Apple. That is all on today's checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. One of the most closely guarded people on the planet was found recently to be spilling secrets online. Sounds terrifying. It isn't, but it did raise some security alarms. BuzzFeed News found the personal Venmo accounts of U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. I'm amazed that they have Venmo accounts, and I'm amazed that they were found so easily. Of course, being a news organization, BuzzFeed News published what they found, which got security-minded folks talking. Here to talk to us about it is SecureMac writer Nick Leone. Nick, thank you as always for joining us.
Great to be here.
So let's start at the top. For people who don't know, just do the very basics. What is Venmo?
Sure. It's basically just a mobile payment service, and it's been around for a while. It was started, I think, back in 2009. But it's really blown up a lot in the past few years, driven at least in part by the fact that it was acquired by PayPal in 2013.
Okay, that sounds kind of weird to me. PayPal was already the name, in paying pals. It's kind of what they did. What's the big differentiator for Venmo?
Well, there's a couple of things. So the founders of Venmo wanted it to be like a quick and easy way for friends to send each other small or smallish amounts of money, or to split the check on the fly, things like that. So, like roommates paying the bills together or friends out at a restaurant or whatever. And so Venmo is typically for smaller transactions with people you know. And it's not really meant to be any kind of alternative to traditional banking, which is how, PayPal can, for example, function for online businesses. Another difference is Venmo is currently US only. PayPal obviously is much bigger. It's global. And the really big difference, though, is that social aspect of Venmo, right? So it was always intended to be used by people who know each other well. And the service still has this strong social component. Like Venmo users have a friends list, and Venmo transaction details are even published to social media-like feeds. Not the actual amounts of money spent, but still like a decent amount of info.
Okay, and so I'm guessing it's those posts that, have some people worried.
Yeah, and it's been a concern for a while. A couple of years ago, Electronic Frontier Foundation published an open letter asking Venmo to, quote, clean up your privacy settings.
I'm sorry, that's kind of funny because it's a social network. I'm guessing that's a non-starter since their whole thing is, hey, look at me and pay me money.
Yeah, but EFF had a few suggestions about how to make Venmo more privacy friendly, and we'll hit that in a bit. But the reason this is all coming up again now is that BuzzFeed article you mentioned. So the BuzzFeed reporters say they found the president's account and what they describe as a network of his private social connections. And they did all of that using the app's built-in search tool and the public friends feature. And here's the thing, they say it took them like a grand total of 10 minutes to find all of this information on Venmo.
Okay, I'm sorry, did they find it because of the public friends or because of the public feature? I'm trying to, sort of parse out which one was the problem.
Well, on Venmo, by default, it's kind of the same thing, which is one of the things EFF wants to see changed. So your Venmo transactions are set to public by default. So in other words, like if you don't know that you can set your transactions to private, you could be broadcasting all of your activity over the platform without even knowing it. And the other thing is when you first set Venmo up, the app really, really encourages you to import your contacts list from your phone or to use your Facebook friends list to do the same thing. Which sounds good until you realize that this basically produces a giant Venmo friend list that then reveals a ton of information about your personal network.
Yeah, which is, I'm thinking about for me personally, first of all, it's creepy for anybody, but it's also not necessarily accurate because I've got people in my contacts that I haven't spoken to in, years Or sometimes I've got people in my contacts that I've spoken to maybe once, maybe twice. We're not exactly friends, and certainly we're not going to be paying each other.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the problem, right? That could make you kind of a Venmo nightmare because you can't hide those connections, even if you're no longer really connected, right? So Venmo does let you make your transactions private, which is great, but there's no way to hide your list of Venmo friends from other users, which is like not so great and actually a huge concern. So as that BuzzFeed piece pointed out, like obviously, first of all, it's a major privacy issue, but beyond that, it's potentially a safety issue too, since it can open up your personal life to people who might want to exploit that information. Trolls, stalkers, spies, or, in some cases, law enforcement. And the thing is, I mean, that's not just hypothetical, right? It's not just BuzzFeed saying, well, what if? One security expert, Bruce Schneier, pointed out therapists have already had patient lists exposed because they use Venmo. Women have been stalked by boyfriends because of information on Venmo. Reporters have had their confidential sources exposed because of Venmo.
Okay. Where this gets weird is then when you're talking about the president. I mean, it never would have occurred to me, the Bidens would have Venmo accounts. I mean, was BuzzFeed like playing TMZ or something where they're just like punching in names of famous people and, seeing what they could find?
No. And so this is the really interesting thing. It came about because of casual conversation. So the New York Times was writing a report on the Biden White House, like inside the Biden White House. And they were talking with people who work in the White House. And one aide mentioned in passing that Biden likes to try out new technology with his grandkids. So this person said, oh, yeah, his grandkids show him TikTok videos and the president uses Venmo to send them money sometimes. And that was it, right? Just a little offhand comment. But that made it into the Times piece, which was then published for all the world to see, which is why the BuzzFeed reporters knew to look for a Joe Biden Venmo account. And so that aide probably just thought it was sweet, or, putting a human face on a politician or, showing how the president is up with technology or whatever. And it may have done those things, but it also exposed Biden to a bit of risk, which when you're talking about the president of the United States is exposing millions of people to risk.
That's both hilarious and also like, it sounds like the most realistic and most boring Tom Clancy novel ever written.
Yeah. Venmo 6. No,
yeah,
not...
or a clear and present Venmo.
Exactly. But seriously, this is how real life gets messed up, right? It's not like Hollywood. And it's why we always say, don't give information away if you don't have to, because you don't know how someone else could use it. Now, like, obviously, most of us aren't talking to New York Times reporters, but lots of us, for example, publish little details about our personal lives on social media. And if that information is public-facing, like if you haven't changed the privacy settings to restrict it to only friends or friends of friends or whatever, that information can be abused. In the Biden Venmo story, it was just investigative journalists doing their job, using that kind of publicly available information to research a story. But again, real world, this is the kind of open source intelligence gathering, which is what bad guys use to find material to use in targeted phishing attacks, in social engineering attacks, in scams, and so on. So, moral of the story, don't share more than you have to.
How do you do the Venmo thing safely? We'll get some tips from Nick in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Big, colorful new iMacs are making their way from Apple to consumers, each one with a bullseye on it. You've heard us talk about it here. Bad guys are targeting Macs like never before. Whether your Mac is shiny and new or has a scuff or sticker or two, you can protect it with MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full range or targeted scanning all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your machine. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at SecureMac.com/MacScan. Then once you decide to buy for less. You can take a little off the cost of your subscription to MacScan 3 with offer code CHECKLIST. Try it first. Watch it kick those tracking cookies to the curb. Then once you decide to buy for less with offer code CHECKLIST at SecureMac.com/MacScan. We're talking today with Nick Leone. He writes for SecureMac. SecureMac.com/news, by the way, if you want to keep up with the stuff that he's posting. He posts a few times a week. And I always find some interesting stuff. And sometimes I round up that stuff and bring it here to you and bring him as well. So I'm thinking the best way to protect your privacy if you're using Venmo, hear me out, stop using Venmo. Now, I'm not saying that's what people should do, but I'm thinking that's probably the best way to, keep your information safe on/from it. Now, the thing is, I'm a fan of Apple Pay Cash, but not everybody has an iPhone. And, additionally, Venmo users probably like using Venmo because they've been using it for a while and they want to keep using it. So let's assume people aren't going to just drop it. Nick has put together a checklist for this episode of the checklist on ways to Venmo more securely.
Yeah, we have 3 key suggestions if you want to use Venmo in a more secure way. So first of all, set your transactions to private. As we mentioned earlier, Venmo transactions are set to public by default. And, one of the EFF's demands was that Venmo make them private by default, which would be great, but Venmo so far has not done that. But users can change that on their own. So if you want to change the default setting to private for all transactions, go into the Venmo app, go to Settings and to Privacy, and there you'll see an option called Default Privacy Setting. And all you have to do is change that setting to private. And the neat thing is you can actually change the privacy settings for all of your past transactions as well. So if you've been publishing stuff to Venmo and you want to kind of unpublish it, you can do that. Go to Settings, Privacy, so same place, and then Past Transactions and set that to private. And the only thing to know about that is if you change all of your past transactions to private, you can't undo it. You can't make them public again. So if you do want to change past transactions to private, you have to be really sure that's how you want to keep things.
You could blog it, though. If you decide, I want to tell everybody who I did actually pay, then, start a blog and you'll accomplish just as much. Now, I did read that you can actually set individual transactions to private as well.
You can, right? And that's another layer of control that users have. But if your default is public transactions, then you're going to have to remember to change an individual transaction to private if you want it to be private. So probably for most people, the best thing to do would be just to make the default private. But yeah, you can do it one by one if you like.
Next item on the checklist, sir.
Number 2, anonymize your Venmo username. So a lot of people out there are using their real names on Venmo or something very close to their real name. But in most cases, there's really no reason to do that. So Venmo tells you, right? They say, we strongly recommend that you create a username that's unique to you and easily recognizable. And, they go on to say, this is going to make it easier for all your friends to find you on Venmo. And sounds good, but you got to think about it. Venmo is looking out for Venmo, right? This advice is because they want to grow their platform. They want to grow their user base. So yes, there's some truth to their advice, but what they don't say is using an easily found, easily recognizable username also makes it easier for other people to find you on Venmo, people who aren't your friends and maybe people that you don't want to find you. So if you're concerned about privacy, you might want to change your Venmo username to something a little bit harder to link to you personally. And to do this, you just go to Settings and Edit Profile and type in your new username in the username field. And
then the last item on today's short list, sir.
Limit your Venmo friends list. So as we discussed, by far the biggest privacy issue with Venmo is that everyone can see your friends list. And again, if you imported a huge list of contacts when you first set up the app, you're probably revealing a lot about yourself and about your network of friends and associates. So it is probably a good idea to remove any of those automatically imported friends who you don't really use Venmo with. Now, the annoying part about this is you're going to have to do that manually, but you can do it, which is the important thing. So to remove a friend from your friends list, go to that person's Venmo profile, tap the little friends check mark, and then unfriend. It's also worth mentioning you can block individual users on the platform. And when you block someone, they can't search for your profile in the app. They can't find you on the app. So that might be a good thing to do. Like if you know that there is one specific person who's a threat to your privacy. So I don't know, crazy ex, obsessed fan, maybe just someone you don't want to have extra details about your life, right? Nosy parent or, your manager at work or whatever. And if you want to block someone, you go to the user's profile, you tap the 3 circles in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and you look for that red block user option. So again, if you do use Venmo and you want to keep using Venmo, just do these 3 things and you'll have a safer and a more private Venmo experience.
Everything from Apple got updates this week. While all of those updates have security components, the Mac update was probably the most important since its security fix was the most urgent. As seen on Mac Rumors, Apple's notes for the macOS Big Sur 11.4 update say the update adds Apple Podcast subscriptions and channels and includes important bug fixes. They kind of buried the security lead, though. A piece from Forbes says the device management firm Jamf discovered a serious security issue last year when they were researching the XCS set malware. According to Forbes, the hackers who created the spyware discovered they could get around the macOS privacy feature known as transparency, consent, and control. The TCC is a feature that raises a flag when an app is doing something that might affect a user's privacy, such as taking photos or recording keystrokes, asking for explicit permission from the user before the action is taken. The malware coders found a way to hijack other apps' permissions, one that had already been approved by the user. So, you give an app permission to record the screen, and the malware can sneak in under that permission and record the screen without you knowing. Now, this is apparently not theoretical. The Forbes piece indicates that it's been spotted working under the radar through Zoom. Well, that's no big deal. I mean, almost nobody uses Zoom, except for everybody since the start of the pandemic. I was, of course, kidding. This is a potentially big deal. Thus far, says the report, the hackers have only been seen abusing the flaw to take screenshots, but the same exploit could be abused to pilfer files, record audio over the microphone, or take images via the Mac's camera, according to Jamf. The flaw is fixed in macOS 11.4, as are nearly 60 others, according to Apple's security page for the update. So you probably don't want to drag your heels on this one. See also everything else Apple makes. iOS 14.6 and iPadOS 14.6 tackled 38 security issues. watchOS 7.5 took on 24. tvOS 14.6 tackled 25 security vulnerabilities. And we are still not done. If you're an OS or two back on the Mac, there are straight-up security updates for you. Apple's security site heralds the arrival of Security Update 2021-004 Mojave for Mojave, Security Update 2021-003 Catalina for Catalina, and Safari 14.1.1 for both Mojave and Catalina. No new features, of course, unless you count security fixes. So, you do that updating thing you do, won't you? And with that, another checklist is checked. Thanks again to Nick Leone for joining us today. Don't forget you can keep up with what he's keeping up with on the SecureMac site, securemac.com/news. And as long as you're there, why not check out the page for this show as well, securemac.com/checklist. Notes there for all the shows we've done, and you can listen to every one of them right there too. SecureMac.com/checklist. If you like this show, can you show us some love? Please review the show wherever you found it, and please tell everybody you know about the checklist. If you have a question you would like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.